Look at any major city today, and you will find massive, multi-million-dollar structures dedicated entirely to keeping strangers alive. Scale that up to the geopolitical level, and we have international bodies where competing nations at least attempt to cooperate, holding up human rights and diplomacy as the global standard. But for the vast majority of human history, building a civilization looked entirely different. Shaping the world required standing armies, extreme wealth, and the absolute physical crushing of your enemies. Yet the individual most responsible for wiring our modern sense of charity, justice, and universal value possessed exactly none of those things. No military command, no political office, and no vast treasury. 2,000 years ago, the Mediterranean was a volatile powder keg. People living under military occupation were anticipating a political disruptor, someone to arrive with massive force and finally break the iron grip of the prevailing empires. There were even ancient texts circulating that predicted exactly this, a leader born to redirect the course of humanity and establish a new kind of kingdom. When that birth actually happened, it bypassed the fortified palaces entirely. It took place in a damp, stone-carved shelter meant for livestock, in total obscurity. At a time when authority was strictly measured by how much violence a ruler could inflict, the message accompanying this arrival was peace on earth. It completely inverted the standard logic of power from day one. Decades later, as he began his public life, Jesus did not recruit generals or stockpile weapons. He gathered laborers, social outcasts, and enormous crowds of the poorest citizens on open hillsides. His philosophical demands deeply frustrated those expecting a violent uprising. He explicitly told his followers to love their enemies and to actively pray for the exact people persecuting them. When a severe, sudden storm threatened to capsize his followers at sea, historical accounts say he simply commanded the chaos to settle, demonstrating an absolute authority over nature itself. Instead of weaponizing that authority, he used it to heal incurable diseases, restore sight, and feed thousands of starving people with almost zero resources. To the political and religious establishment, this was a massive liability. An armed rebellion could be easily crushed by a trained Roman legion, but a widespread movement rooted in radical, self-sacrificing love threatened the entire foundation of their control. The ruling authorities knew they had to neutralize him before his teachings completely destabilized their grip on the region. They found their opening through one of his closest confidants. Under the cover of night, hidden among ancient olive trees, he was handed over to the temple guards. What followed was a rabid, illegal trial. By morning, he was condemned by the state and forced to carry the heavy wooden instrument of his own execution up a rocky hill outside the city limits. Even in his final, agonizing hours on the cross, he refused to abandon his philosophy. As the soldiers finalized his execution, his response was to ask for their forgiveness. To the Roman Empire, the case was closed. The brutal machinery of the state had won, proving once again that pacifist ideals cannot survive the reality of iron and wood. For 3 days, the movement dissolved into silence. His followers scattered into hiding, fully believing their cause had died on that hill. Then, at sunrise on the 3rd day, the historical record points to an anomaly that defied every biological law. The massive stone sealing his grave had been pushed aside, and the burial chamber inside was completely empty. This event, the resurrection, inverted the entire narrative of defeat. If the state could no longer enforce its ultimate penalty, death, then Rome's supreme authority had just been shattered. While Roman legions crumbled, his teachings rapidly spread across the Mediterranean through a resilient grassroots network. Over centuries, these expanding nodes carried the foundational blueprints for hospitals, orphanages, and universal human rights. A man without an army, without a vast fortune, without writing a single book, managed to outlast every empire that tried to erase him. 2,000 years later, his words of love and forgiveness are still actively shaping how humanity operates. And that enduring influence is perhaps the most verifiable miracle in history.